On a humid August night in 2013, a Life Flight helicopter descended onto a small patch of Pennsylvania grass. Inside, Millissa Rocubba was dying. A .40 caliber bullet had entered her skull, ending her life in every way that mattered before she even hit the hospital gurney. But a few miles away, her husband, Bruno, was in a different emergency room. He had a hole clean through the center of his palm. To the police, it looked like a tragedy, a freak accident during a domestic dispute. To the daughters, it was the end of their world. But to the house, to the silent, unblinking security camera mounted on the garage, it was something else entirely. It would take 12 years, a burned mattress, a stolen inheritance, and a voice recorded from the beyond to prove that what happened in that bedroom wasn't an accident. It was an execution. If you lived in Lackawanna County, you knew the Rocubbas. They were the blue blood family. Millissa was a former police officer. Bruno was a Navy veteran. They had two beautiful daughters, Chelsea and Sabrina. They went hunting together. They went fishing together. In every Facebook photo, they are smiling, sun-kissed, and seemingly unbreakable. But perfection is usually a curtain drawn over something rotting. As the girls grew up, they began to notice the smell. It started with the hair incident. Sabrina recalls a night where the drinking turned the hero dad into a monster. She watched Bruno grab her mother by the back of her hair and whip her into a wall with such velocity that the house shook. Millissa couldn't breathe. The girls were terrified. But the next morning, the curtain was drawn again. Millissa downplayed it. Everyone has disagreements, she'd say. But 2 weeks before the shooting, the curtain stayed open just long enough for Millissa to deliver a chilling prophecy. She took her daughter Chelsea for a drive. She didn't look at her. She just stared at the road and said, "Your dad isn't who you think he is. He's pulled a gun on me before. He does it when I say no to him." Millissa was documenting her own danger. She just didn't realize she was running out of time to act on it. August 7th, 2013. It was a fine night. The Rocubbas went to dinner with their best friends, Jack and Tonya Wilczewski. They laughed, they ate, they drank. Jack would later testify that they seemed perfectly normal. No arguing, no tension. They arrived home at 10 p.m. At 10:30 p.m., the 911 call was placed. When the police arrived, they found a scene of absolute chaos. Bruno was bleeding from his hand, hysterical. Millissa was on the bed, her life leaking into the mattress. Bruno's story was immediate, practiced, and seemingly logical. "I was worried about break-ins. I left the gun in the nightstand for her. I went to clear the chamber because our grandson was coming over tomorrow. She leaned back, I flinched, and it just went off. It went through my hand and hit her." Think about that. Who shoots themselves through their own palm to cover up a murder? It's a high-stakes gamble. The police looked at his bandaged hand and thought, no man would do this on purpose. They let him go home. They didn't even take him to the station that night. This is where the story gets truly disturbing. While Millissa was in the ICU, brain dead and kept alive only by machines, Bruno wasn't at the hospital holding her hand. He was at the house, and he had a list of chores for his daughters. He told Chelsea and Sabrina, "I can't look at the blood, it's too painful. You need to clean it." Imagine being 22 years old, your mother is dying in a hospital bed, and your father, the man you're supposed to trust, hands you a bucket of bleach. He made his daughters strip the mattress. He made them load that heavy, blood-soaked evidence into the back of a truck. He told them to drive it deep into the woods and burn it. As the flames licked the fabric, the physical evidence of the trajectory, the blood spatter, and the struggle vanished into the Pennsylvania sky. Bruno wasn't just grieving, he was erasing. Within days of the funeral, he gave away her clothes. He gave away her 10-year-old Rottweiler, Zeus. He wanted every atom of Millissa Rocubba removed from his sight. And then he brought in the replacement. Remember Tonya, the best friend from dinner the night of the shooting? Within months, not years, months, Tonya left her husband and moved into Melissa's house. Chelsea, living next door, had to watch through her window as Tonya cooked Christmas dinner in her mother's kitchen. Tonya started wearing her hair like Melissa. She sat in Melissa's favorite chair on the porch. The daughters were trapped in a psychological nightmare. If they spoke up, they lost their father. If they stayed silent, they betrayed their mother. Bruno used that guilt like a weapon. He made them sign paperwork they didn't understand, effectively stealing their $300,000 inheritance. He told them he was suicidal. He made himself the victim of his own accident. But in 2015, the mask slipped for 1 second. Bruno looked at Chelsea and with a chilling calmness said, "I didn't mean to kill her. I just tried to scare her." He admitted there was an argument. He admitted the gun was out on purpose. And then he threatened his own daughter. "Go ahead, tell the police. I'll ruin your credibility. No one will believe a girl who burned the evidence." For 5 more years, Bruno Rocubba lived as a free man. He played the role of the doting grandfather. He thought he had won. He thought the fire in the woods had consumed the truth. He forgot about the DVR. For 7 years, Bruno Rocubba lived in a house of secrets. He had successfully convinced his daughters to burn the evidence. He had stolen their inheritance, and he had replaced their mother with a new woman who sat in her chair and cooked in her kitchen. He was the man who got away with it. But in 2020, a new set of eyes landed on the case file. Corporal Greg Allen of the Pennsylvania State Police wasn't looking at the family's grief. He was looking at the mechanics of the weapon. And what he found was the first crack in Bruno's 10-year lie. Bruno's story relied on a freak discharge, but the gun wasn't a toy. It was a .40 caliber semi-automatic with 2 distinct safety features. Corporal Dan Nylon, a ballistics expert, took that same model to the lab. To make that gun fire, you have to depress a grip safety and a trigger safety simultaneously. It doesn't just go off. It requires a deliberate, firm grip. Then came the blood. Remember that hole in Bruno's palm? Bruno said he was sitting on the edge of the bed, pointing the gun away from him when it fired. But the detectives found blood spatter on the wall behind where Bruno claimed to be sitting. The physics didn't lie. For the blood to hit that wall, Bruno had to be standing over Melissa, facing the headboard, holding the gun in a struggle. He hadn't flinched. He had been pinning her down. The bullet through his hand wasn't a sign of an accident. It was a sign of a fight. He fired the gun while his own hand was likely over the muzzle, trying to muffle the sound or control her movement. But the detectives needed more than physics. They needed a witness, and they found one in the most unlikely place, a dusty, outdated DVR system that had been sitting in the house since 2013. When the police first investigated in 2013, they saw the home security cameras, but the technology was too old to pull the data. By 2020, the FBI had the tools. They took the hard drive into a dark lab, unplugged every distracting noise in the room, and hit play. What they heard was a horror movie in real time. For 30 minutes leading up to the gunshot, the perfect couple wasn't having a quiet night. They were in a war. The audio captured them pulling into the driveway. Bruno: "Next time you get your own fucking ride." Melissa: "Whatever." The argument followed them inside. Through the open windows, the microphone picked up the sound of things being thrown, the sound of a dog barking in terror, and then the voice of Millissa Rocubba, clear as a bell from beyond the grave, shouting the last words she would ever speak. "I didn't do anything! What is wrong with you?" Seconds later, the crack of a .40 caliber round. There was no cleaning the chamber. There was no playing around. There was only a woman pleading for her life and a man who had decided her time was up. June 3, 2022. Bruno is driving to work, likely thinking about his plans for the weekend. Suddenly, the sirens are behind him. The hero dad is pulled out of his truck and handcuffed. He's charged with murder and the theft of his daughter's inheritance. Even then, the manipulation didn't stop. From behind bars, he called Chelsea. He played on her love. He made her feel so guilty that she actually helped pay his legal bills. She was still caught in the web of the man who had erased her mother. But the evidence was a mountain he couldn't climb. The audio, the ballistics, and the changing stories were too much. In May 2024, facing a life sentence, Bruno finally blinked. He took a plea deal for third-degree murder. At his sentencing in January 2025, Melissa's sister Joanne stood up. She looked at Bruno, the man who had been her brother-in-law for decades, and said, "You tried to erase her existence, but you cannot erase her memories. Every time you come up for parole, I will be there to make sure you stay behind glass." You would think the story ends there, with the monster in a cage and the family finally able to breathe. But this story has one final devastating twist. Just weeks after Bruno was sent away, in March 2025, tragedy struck the Rocubba family one last time. Chelsea's 13-year-old son, Greg, the grandson Bruno claimed he was protecting the night of the shooting, was out riding his ATV. He collided with an SUV and died instantly. The grandson was the only thing Bruno and Chelsea still shared. Now he was gone too. Today, Bruno Rocubba sits in a Pennsylvania prison cell. He won't be eligible for parole until 2035. He will be an old man by then. His daughters are left in a silent neighborhood, living in the shadow of a house where a security camera caught the truth that a father tried to burn away. Millissa Rocubba was a police officer, a mother, and a friend. She spent her final moments fighting, and in the end, it was her own voice captured on a grainy digital file that made sure her killer couldn't hide in the light any longer. This wasn't just a story about a gunshot. It was a story about the masks we wear and the people we think we know. Bruno Rocubba spent a decade betting on the silence of his daughters and the ashes of a burned mattress. He almost won. He lived a full life for 9 years while Mellissa remained a pending file in a cold cabinet. It reminds us that justice doesn't always move like a lightning bolt. Sometimes it's a slow, agonizing crawl through old DVR tapes and blood spatter patterns. But as we look at the Rocubba family today, a family shattered by a father's hand and then struck by the sudden, tragic loss of 13-year-old Greg, we have to ask, is there ever really closure in a case like this? Or is there just the long, hard process of learning to live with the truth? Millissa Rocubba found her voice 12 years after she took her last breath. She spoke from the grave to protect her daughters one last time. And tonight, she finally rests with the truth on her side. If this deep dive into the Rocubba case moved you, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. We go where the files are cold and the stories are deep. What do you think was the turning point? Was it the burned mattress, or was it the secret Mellissa shared in the car just 2 weeks before she died? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. Thank you for watching. Stay vigilant, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next investigation.